So I think that the disintermediation is the reason why news organizations cannot afford to ignore AI. We must be participating in this conversation. We must be experimenting with these tools. We cannot ignore it. And so that's kind of the elephant in the room when we think about, like, we've already given up owning the platforms that people get information on. It happened with the internet. It happened with social, so this is one of many of a series of evolutions where the information landscape is changing, and we have to change with it because ultimately we are providers of information.
Hello, and welcome to the Media Copilot. It's a podcast that explores how AI is changing media, journalism, and content creation. I'm Pete Pachal, longtime tech journalist and founder of the Media Copilot, and I'm excited to bring you fascinating conversations with fellow journalists, media executives, and the people building how the business of news will work in the future. This week, I'm joined by Darla Cameron, Chief Product Officer at the Texas Tribune. I've been wanting to talk to Darla for a little while. She's one of the people shaping how AI actually lands inside a newsroom, both in terms of the tools reporters use and the experiences that audiences have. And that includes chatbots. The Tribune has experimented quite a bit with AI chat experiences, and she and I explore what her team has learned from them. Spoiler, chatbots probably aren't going to save the news business, but there are some things they are good at, and the data they generate has its uses. We also dig into the Tribune's position as a nonprofit and how that shapes its relationship with bots and scraping. When your mission is to serve all of Texas, you might actually want AI platforms reading and summarizing your work. How about that? And finally, we look inside the newsroom itself, how the Tribune sets its rules around AI use, what the current level of skepticism looks like among journalists, and where Darla sees the most productive uses of AI heading next. That's a lot. So I hope you enjoy the conversation. And if you do, I'd be grateful if you leave a review for the podcast. Reviews, especially on Apple and Spotify, really do help the show. So please leave one if you can. And also a quick note. You may not know this, but a big part of my business at the Media Copilot is teaching AI to editorial teams. I host a monthly virtual AI class for beginners. It's only 60 minutes, and like everything I do, it's focused on practical takeaways for media professionals, people in journalism, PR, communications. Plus, it's only $49. Each one's a live class, so it's always up to date, and I guarantee you'll walk away with something you can apply to your day-to-day. You can sign up at mediacopilot.ai. Okay, now it's time for my conversation with Darla Cameron, Chief Product Officer of the Texas Tribune. Darla, welcome to the Media Copilot.
Hey, Pete, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming. I'm thrilled to talk to you. I think we are really in need of someone like you who can tell us a lot about what I would call the rubber hits the road with regard to using AI in media and journalism. You obviously have tons of experience building stuff and looking at stuff and learning about stuff with regard to AI for the Texas Tribune. Your title, the Chief Product Officer, that can mean a few different things at a few different places that I've worked at anyway. I'd love to, before we get to all the cool stuff you've been working on and big picture stuff, I'd love to hear just more about you and your role and what does it look like day to day and how the Texas Tribune even thinks about product and, then how AI and automation have really started to influence things in the last couple of years.
Yeah, absolutely. First, thank you so much for having me in this conversation. I'm happy to be here. So the Tribune has an interesting evolution of product history. We've had people in product roles for most of our existence. The Tribune is a almost 16-year-old nonprofit newsroom covering politics and policy based in Texas. And when we started out, there was not a lot of consensus about the best way that a digital news operation should operate, right? Like, how do we get news on the internet effectively? How do we get data to people? How do we, make information accessible to our audience? So we really became an innovator in terms of how we do that. We've built our own CMS and ran on that for most of our existence. We built news applications and so many creative ways to distribute information to Texans. And then product really, in my mind, we've defined it a bunch of different ways. For a long time, product was kind of like a de facto tech team, right? Like even IT help was product at the Trib. Then we've had leaders who said, oh, the news is the product, which is absolutely true. But the way that I think about it is product is the interface between the content and the audience, right? So we are building and helping people really optimize the platforms that we use to distribute information to our audience and making sure that we can present information to everybody in a way that makes business sense, right? So making sure that we have opportunities for sponsorship, for donors, for people to become a member, for people to like feel involved with our journalism and to really participate in it in effective ways. So it's been an evolution. My background is in data journalism. I worked at the Washington Post before I came to the Tribune to lead our data journalism team that makes a lot of the data explorers and resources that help people vote in an election, help them know about the school in their neighborhood. Like, so my background was in that space, which I didn't really define those as products until I switched to product. I'm like, oh, I was doing product the whole time.
Mhm.
So it's been an interesting evolution. And I think that, the evidence of the News Product Summit event in Chicago in October is just really good evidence that like this discipline, which is so centered around how to make meaningful change and make sure that news organizations are serving their audiences in the best possible way, is just on the upswing in really in amazing and inspiring ways in the news industry right now. So I love
Yeah.
to see it.
Well, that's the trick now, right? Because the audiences are now perhaps separated by this new AI layer that is everyone's contending with. We're going to get to that in a bit, but I honestly want to hear a little bit more about how you think about AI and how you're applying it to what you're doing there. And I guess I would put them in two buckets and let me know if this is how you think about it in terms of internal tools and audience facing experiences. And why don't we start with sort of actually, what I'm about to ask intersects both a little bit, but I always want to get a sense from people who actively work in newsrooms, kind of what's the vibe now? I feel like there was a lot of skepticism from the editorial side about AI, which rightly so, for a lot of reasons. But I also feel like now it's been about 3 years since ChatGPT first came on the scene, 2 years since it was like kind of actively being talked about and integrated into real operations. So what is the vibe now like with your team there, and how does the team regard AI broadly? And is that even just too broad a brush now?
Yeah.
Your thoughts?
I think that there's still skepticism. And I would say that the overall vibe outside of the Tribune and in the larger industry right now is like it's getting a little more real for folks that like this will change the way that a lot of careers and a lot of things in the world operate, right? And there's still that kind of hesitation and anxiety about it. And so I want to make sure that at the Tribune we're really intentional about making it clear, like our AA policy states that we will not use AI to replace journalists, right? So like first off, that's the beginning of the policy. And then from there, here's what we're willing to use it for, and here's where we're going to draw those lines. And I think that making sure that that we're doing things that both our audience and our staff are comfortable with is really, really important. Our reporters all love Otter, right? Like who wants to manually transcribe an interview? I've done that when I was a reporter. It was not fun,
Oh
right?
yes.
So it's kind of that balance between being aware that AI is going to be incorporated in more and more and more of the tools that we use for our work every day. So how can we like be cognizant of that while saying like, is it changing things that cross a line for us, right?
Hmm.
And so we want to make sure we're building in that literacy and comfort with it. It can also help us like there are thousands of local governments in Texas. All our reporters cannot be at every single one. So if we can use AI tools that help us, get access to information that we couldn't otherwise, like I'm all for that. That's very, very helpful. If we can go back and listen to the Planning and Zoning Commission in Odessa, Texas, and find out what was the story that occurred there. So I think that that's, kind of the stance which we're taking and wanting to be cautious and respectful of people's, livelihoods as well.
And what are some of the successes that you've seen in that respect? It sounds like you've doing some probably more than dabbling at this point in terms of summarization of those local governments and things you're doing. And tell me about those successes and how it has sort of warmed perhaps the perspective on AI with the team?
Yeah, I think one example, this was actually late last year. We did a story about Ted Cruz and he has a massive podcast empire. He puts our Texas's junior senator puts out 3 podcasts a week, I believe. So our reporter wanted to be able to get a sense of like what is he saying with these podcasts? Like what is the message he's pushing? How does it relate to the way that he governs, right? And the way that he operates in the US Senate. So he could not, Jasper Scherer could not possibly listen to all of those podcasts,
Maybe it
right?
was like 5x speed and he did
Oh,
it 24/7 for a while.
even then, it would have, and then his to process that and look for trends in a story in that. So he used a tool called GigaFact Parser, and he uploaded the podcast, and it helped him kind of analyze, look for trends. So there's
Nice.
ways in which like AI tools can make our reporting more accessible, or make our research process more mannerable and less manageable and less onerous. And so that's, I think, a really good example. And that's a story that, we point to as like a good example of how we used AI in the reporting process.
And you touched on sort of the knowing how to use it and training and ensuring, obviously you're accounting for the weaknesses of AI.
Yeah.
Has that resulted in any sort of hard and fast rules or central principles? I assume you have an AI policy. What are some of the ways, the guardrails, I guess, you put in to ensure that some of those whatever there's hallucinations. I mean, that's one specific part of AI, but like whatever is happening there isn't sort of leaking out, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, I'll talk about that in 2 parts. One, I think that our editors are the ones who are most often noticing that, like, it's great if reporters use AI to record a meeting and transcribe it, not a confidential meeting. Like we do not put confidential sources into AI tools, right? But if reporters have done that, just making sure that they're still fact checking it, like go back and listen to the quote, make sure that it transcribed the quote directly. And we've had a couple instances where it was not correct, and we had to go back and like do a correction. So I think really making sure that editors are that reporters and editors feel okay talking to each other about what their processes are, right? And like what are the things that we're looking for? How do you kind of be aware that this needs an extra fact check, just like anything that we publish requires? So that's one part of it. The other part is actually we we do not publish any or very limited like content that is AI generated or AI modified. We do audio stories with Everlit, a plugin that allows us to create an audio version of our content, which before we did not have an audio version of every story, or of like it was a very rare thing if we had an
And
audio
you're
version,
talking about it's essentially a narrated
a
version of the
narrated
article,
story.
not like a summarization.
Yeah, it does. It's
Yep.
not a summarization. We don't do any AI summarization actually. But we do this like it's literally an AI voice reading the story, and we can train it on the pronunciation of weird Texas place names. Like San Antonio is in Bear County. That has an X in it. You wouldn't guess it, but So like it's been an interesting process to kind of say, okay, does this sound authentic? Does it sound genuine? Does it sound It's a little uncanny valley in terms of how the voice sounds, but making sure we can make it accurate so it'll sound real to our readers. And a lot of readers respond to us and say that they really like AI narration because their eyes are tired or they have macular degeneration and like can't spend that much time looking at a screen, but they still want the news. So we see that as like an accessibility play. In other We also produce some AI chatbots that are trained on a really specific, narrow subset of stories. So our machine learning engineer who created those made sure that, like, first off, we had a really rigorous back and forth testing process with the reporters, right? Who'd covered those topics. We had one about vouchers and one about Texas's water shortage. And then the key innovation in those is that if it does not know the answer to a question, it says so. It says, "Oh, I don't know how the voucher program is going to this proposed voucher program that Texas voted into law this year. They did not know our stories had not reported on how that would impact the teacher retirement system, right? So we told the reporters, hey, this didn't answer this question. And they were like, that is a great story idea. And they went and wrote a story about it, right? So it kind of turned into a surprise engagement tool. And we've actually set up an automation so that when the chatbot doesn't know, it sends a Slack message to the reporters and says like, hey, here's a question that we couldn't answer from the reporting that we've done. So these are things you might want to look into and think about in terms of like, this might be other stories, like things that your audience wants to know about this topic.
Nice. And do you have any like hard and fast rules for against? You mentioned you don't do summarization. Is that a rule or is that just something you're still working on? And what are some other rules that the team abides under?
Yeah, so it's I would say it's not really a rule. It's mainly just like we haven't found a tool that works well enough for it. Like we've tried some, but so many of the summarization like mechanisms we tried, like introduced an error, right? Like it says that someone's accused versus convicted. Like it said, like in our testing, we found things that our journalists just weren't comfortable with. So until and if we can come up with a summarization system that like allows for reporter fact checks and allows for like that allows for editing, we aren't comfortable doing that. That's not to say that we don't find summarization valuable from a product perspective, because I know that it is, right? Like we obviously redistribute our work on social platforms, we create social videos out of it. We're like, we have a news quiz that is generated by AI, but it has in a really important fact checking step. With this tool from News Games, we can enter 5 URLs for the week and it writes a multiple choice quiz and then we edit it, right? So like I think making sure that we have the capability for that editing and that we're using AI to repackage and redistribute our work without materially changing it is our
Mm,
objective. We do have a hard and fast rule against AI for images that we
interesting.
have a network of 100 freelance photographers all across Texas. It is so important to us that everything visually that you see in our photojournalism is real
Mm.
and actually occurred in the real world. So that's an example of a line that we're just not like we're not willing to cross that line.
Yeah, it's obviously for news organizations. There's limited use cases though. Um, I don't want to go down the rabbit hole at all, but it is like the idea of photo illustrations is obviously for newspapers has been a thing since before AI, of course, and so that's sort of the one use case I could go to. All right, maybe for that, but generally, like if you're a fact-based organization, having a bunch of AI generated stuff doesn't exactly, even if it's you disclose, it's not like it's
Yeah.
a good look.
Yeah, I also frankly, like, want to still be able to give business to the freelance illustrators who we work with, right? Like, it's how do we kinda balance that? The need for, like, their work is valuable, and often when we
Yeah,
are hiring, we are definitely a fact-based organization. We don't cover food, we don't cover sports, like, we don't cover a lot of the things
yeah,
that like, newspapers, which, like, we don't have a print product, we're digital only, like, we don't cover a lot of the topics that they might have done photo illustrations for, is one factor,
right.
and the other is just, like, it's really important for us that our photojournalism especially is representative of the people of Texas, right? And that it shows like reality of what is occurring in our communities. So yeah, that's one line that we're not willing
Well,
to
it's
cross.
a good transition also to audience experiences and what
Yep.
they might find valuable
Yep.
with when you apply AI to, whatever you're doing. I know you guys have experimented with, chatbots a lot more than a lot of other, organizations, and, I'd really love to get into the weeds a little bit on this with you because I've done my own share of experimenting with them and probably seen similar things in terms of the low usage, but for specific things can be very helpful. And first, give me your broad takeaways, and then I'd love to even get down to some of the places they might be most effective, even maybe a little bit of the UI things to people to think about as people deploy these.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. So we've had a journey with chatbots. The first one that we created in early 2024 was inspired by kind of the idea that I think a lot of people begin their AI journeys with, like, "Oh, we have this massive archive. Like, wouldn't it be nice if we had a chatbot that could query our archive?" And we built a couple different versions of a whole archive system, both with a partner, with an AI company here in Austin, where we're headquartered, and along with and with our own technology, right? With have a machine learning engineer on staff who worked on that. And they were just bad, frankly. Like, it was not good. The way they seemed really like they would get details wrong. They would just, like, didn't really pass, like, the sniff test, especially for journalists and editors who we were testing them with. But the biggest barrier that I saw and most difficult thing about that technology in the context of news is the problem of recency, right? So if you ask the chatbot what happened, is Ken Paxton still in office? Ken Paxton is Texas Attorney General. He was impeached and briefly removed from office in 2023 during a big impeachment trial. Like we covered it, it was very dramatic. There's a lot of like twists and turns. We wrote a lot of stories about the lead up to the impeachment trial that happened in the Texas Senate, and the chatbot. And then at the end of the trial, he was returned to office, right? Like he was found not guilty. He's back in office. But the chatbot, because there were more of greater volume of stories about the lead up to the event than the conclusion, it like did not know what had
Hmm.
happened. And it would respond being like, things we'd written before the trial about like the outcome is unknown. We don't know what's coming. And as if that was like the end of the situation. And it just, the early versions just did not know where they were in time, right? This was
Mm,
a little more when like with early GPT, and it's like it's
sure.
the internet as of like the certain date and point in time. And so I think that's gotten better. And then literally today, one of my colleagues was talking about a Claude question where it didn't know that the East Wing of the White House has been torn down, right? So like
Mm,
it I
interesting.
don't think that the recency is solved, even
Mm,
though, like, they are now gonna, go do a Google search and tell you what they find, you know? That to me is the biggest thing that we found about at least for us, about whole archive chatbots as problematic, and I think that is really, like, where our true value as news organizations lies, is that we're watching all the time, and we're writing, like, the newness of news, it's in the name, is actually like a secret superpower and is very valuable. So
mhm.
that is something that I want to like just have us think about in terms of our value to society and the tech industry overall.
Yeah, curious if there might be models that might be better at that. I mean, as Perplexity has their kind of their own sonar stuff, if that
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
does a better job on the recency. Um,
But we
but
pivoted from whole archive to a subset, to like more
right.
RAG, retrieval augmented generation on a single topic. And we found that to be just easier to manage and
Hmm.
it's experimental. I do not think that chatbots are the be all end all for the best AI interface,
Of
like
course.
at
Yeah.
all. It was just the thing that was in front of us at the time. And we're like, great, let's try it.
Yeah, I don't think it's the next dimension of audience engagement, at least
Yeah.
not for media sites. That said, I'm curious if you found valuable information there from the
Yeah.
subset of users that do use them, because
But yeah.
that was always like when I was doing some consulting on this and figuring out some solutions for various clients. It was like, well, don't expect it's going to do a ton for you in terms of growth, but you're going to get some really interesting data
Yeah. Yeah.
from your highly engaged people, because if they're almost by definition, they're not just doing search terms, they're not just passively reading, they're like querying you, the brand, and
Yeah.
it might give some guidance as to either content strategy or experience or what have you. I don't know. You tell me. What did you find out from people who were interacting
Yeah.
with your chatbots?
So uptake was low. Like, people were kind of worried, like, "Oh, did it pillage your stories?" I'm like, "No. Our stories are getting millions of page views. The chatbot's getting, like, thousands, like, low thousands," right? So, it's not we didn't find that it was harming it. We did find that, like, it identified gaps in our coverage, right? Like, the teacher retirement system example is such a good one because there are
Mm,
millions of teachers living on a retirement pension in Texas, right? It's a huge state. So how can we like if it can help us kind of think bigger picture and think about the things we might be missing in a kind of engagement in like a low input, easy to use engagement environment, I think that's worth our while. What I would really like to do, and I think that parts of model context protocol technology make this more possible, is hook it up to our other data systems. So we have a
mm,
database of every school in Texas, right? And that could give a parent who's trying to decide what school to send their child to, whether by the voucher program or Texas has pretty widely available school choice. It's not hard to change schools here. It could give a parent really valuable information. So, if our goal as an organization is helping people make decisions about their lives in Texas and see the ways in which public policy either expands or constrains those decisions, then absolutely I want to try to like create a chatbot or some way for them to
right.
learn about the schools in their community and in their neighborhood directly, right? So that's kind of where I want to take it eventually. Um, obviously it's, that idea and making that a reality is a process, right? But I think we're kind of looking towards doing that next year.
Sure, and I think you're kind of alluding to going beyond the chatbot, doing some audience
Yep.
experience that aren't necessarily going to some bug in the corner or whatever and pop up
Yes.
in a chat
Yeah. Yeah.
window.
The UX and
And
UI is challenging for
yeah,
chatbots.
exactly, and that's kind of
Yeah.
what I like to ask about, and even we don't have to get into, like, whatever the JSON or whatever is, but it's I
Yeah.
think the idea that, um the time to sort of get someone engaged or when they want to engage with sort of going deeper is probably at the article level. I'm
Yeah.
not sure if you I think you'd probably agree. And then once you sort of make that conclusion, what does that open up?
Yeah.
And there's been everything from various folks anyway proposed of like, oh, well, maybe with some personalization, you might even get another version of the article, obviously with some kind of transparency about what you're seeing and
Yeah.
or I don't know, questions coming in, and I'm sure you guys have brainstormed a bunch of things, but what have you tried out? What do you think might be viable? What do you think is a good way to sort of bring that AI potential into the storytelling level, I guess?
Yeah. I mean, we've tried a bunch of different things. So our first um chatbot that was built fully in-house with our technology was like a bug in the corner, right? Like a little button that you click and like open it and chat with the stories on this topic. And it did not get very big uptake, which like from a UX perspective wasn't really a surprise. We were just like, let's put this out here, let's see what happens. And so we evolved and kind of edited the experience to be a little bit more like in streamlined with the story, right? We still use iframes to embed all of our interactive content. I know it is ancient internet technology, but it works. We make them responsive, so the height adjusts automatically, so it works better. Most of our readers are on their phones, right? So really, I'm optimizing for somebody who's on a small device, who's maybe in a hurry, in line at the grocery store, reading something, catching up on the news before bed, reading an email early in the morning, right? So we want to make sure that it's accessible to people in terms of like screen size accessibility, and that like is kind of my mantra. I'm like, it has to work on mobile or else it's not working at all. So we switched and made it more like a chat interface where it's like embedded within the story and you can enter your search box there. I will note the Tribune has a very long history with interactives that are personalized, in that if you enter your address, we will tell you who's on your ballot, right? Like we've been building tools like that powered by our internal data systems for more than a decade. So I think making sure like people expect that level of personalization from us. Texas is a very large state and we need to be able to drill down to say like, well, what matters about your neighborhood? How is this playing out in your community? So we kind of have a culture and people like expect that of our site, that it's going to have these very accessible, clear, readable data interfaces. So a lot of the collaboration on that front happens between our data visuals team, which is the team that I previously managed, and they moved over to product from the newsroom when I went to manage the product team. Collaboration between data visuals and engineering, right? So kind of getting like the people who are good at making those experiences in the mix with people who are really good at telling visual stories. Um, so I'm looking for them to sync up and find ways to collaborate more.
Nice. Um, we haven't talked till now about the new visitors to websites, which are
Yeah.
these bots that
Yeah.
scrape content and then use that to summarize either for portals or for individuals as they're looking for things. So this has obviously gotten a lot of play and a lot of talk in over the last couple of years. It's the whole existential question. I don't think we're going to answer all that today, but I would like to understand your perspective on it and the Texas Tribune's perspective on it in terms of, what, first of all, do you allow bots to scrape your site? It's probably not a yes or no answer. It might be nuanced. Get into all the nuance you want. And also, like, how are you starting to think about just generally that idea that you mentioned? Obviously, Texas, huge state, a lot of people on their phones. Also, a lot of people talking to Chat GPT and asking
Yep.
for maybe some of the information that you guys have. Is that how do you square that? And you might want to be in some answers, right? And then, but obviously, a lot of sort of handshakes, probably technical and non-technical, might need to happen for that to happen. So tell me your thoughts on the disintermediation and bot traffic.
So I think the disintermediation is the reason why news organizations cannot afford to ignore AI, right? Like they're we must be participating in this conversation. We must be experimenting with these tools. We cannot ignore it. And so that's kind of the elephant in the room when we think about, like, we've already given up being owning the platforms that people get information on. It happened with the internet. It happened with social, so this is one of many of a series of evolutions where the information landscape is changing and we have to change with it because ultimately we are providers of information, right? So that's kind of my take at a high level. The Tribune is in a different position than many organizations that have a paywall. First, I'll say we literally give all of our content away for free. We allow republication. We function kind of as a wire service for local news organizations in Texas who don't have a Capitol bureau, who cannot cover the Capitol, the state Capitol in Austin. So that was part of our mission when we started, and it really continues to be our mission. We appear on about 100 front pages across the state every month, right, in print newspapers. We have nearly 1 million page views from republished stories every month that we know about. That's people who are doing pixel tracking, which we asked them to do. So because our content is already everywhere, there's an element that because of the way we license it, when we redistribute it, like, we don't fully own it, right? So that's one factor. The other is that we love to make licensing deals. We've had licensing deals with textbook publishers. We've had licensing deals with, other media organizations in the state and out of the state around, like, you're welcome to use our content, but if you're using it in this specific way, we would like to be compensated, right? So that was why we were an early joiner of Perplexity's media program, right? We're like, yes, we want to strike a licensing deal on this front. Um, and that's why we're, willing to have those conversations. But for us, because we give our content away for free already, we can't really block bots. So
Mm,
it gets a little more complicated with the, bad actors or people who are going to access it for reasons that are not appropriate. I will also note our
right.
search traffic has not gone down. Like,
Yeah.
we have not seen that hit yet. I'm not, I'm open to the idea that could occur in the future. We keep a really close eye on it. Texas had a really difficult and big, significant news year. We've had some tragedies that occurred here, redistricting. So we still feel relevant in that
Mm.
way in terms of, like, we are providing a unique information about this place, both explaining it to people who live here and people who don't. So
Yeah, it's interesting that you have the stance that you're not really blocking bots, and but you must be on some level. I assume you're tracking them in some way, and certainly you're seeing whatever referrals you might be getting from these engines.
yeah,
Um, do you have any visibility beyond that? Maybe with Perplexity, and that sort of how often can someone be how often is the Texas Tribune attributed, I guess, in queries,
yeah.
even if people aren't, like, clicking through, which, very few do,
Yeah.
and
We
uh,
we use Cloudflare,
mhm,
and some other tools to kind of have visibility in terms of traffic to our site. We don't have great insight, and I don't know if
mhm,
anybody does, um, into how we're being cited on those
mm,
platforms, right? That's a tough thing to track and to
yeah. Are
measure.
you part of,
Yeah.
Prorata and their corpus?
Um We are not because they
Mm.
wouldn't do a licensing deal.
Oh,
So,
interesting.
yeah, yeah. So, we're like,
Gotcha.
"Hey, if we're gonna do this, we wanna have some compensation." I like what they're doing a lot.
Mm,
Yeah.
but you wouldn't wanna do that with some of the bigger platforms? Like, I'm trying to understand when you say licensing or not, like, in other words, you wouldn't block
Yeah.
the GPT bot or for the same reason?
Yeah, we wouldn't block it because we give all of our content away for free to be republished. We would be open to that, but I don't think that I mean, are those deals really available for mid-sized news
I
organizations
mean,
like us?
if
We've
if they
tried,
answer your
like,
email.
"Call me," but yeah, we've definitely, like, approached and tried that, but we're on the large size for a nonprofit, right? But relative to larger corporate media interests, we're not that big. So,
Right, right.
kind of a Goldilocks.
Yeah. Well, we are touching a little bit on monetization though, and it is one of the buckets I kinda left out earlier, like, apart from editorial, audience experiences, there's also, the ad side of things
Yeah.
and commercial, and I feel like I'm hearing a lot about, agents instead of ads now,
Yeah.
and, yeah, I feel like the ad side has always been technically very sophisticated and often first because there's usually money to be made when you have new technology. How are you guys seeing that? Are you thinking about personalization vis-a-vis that at all, or is there an agent kind of stack that's emerging on the ad side? What are you guys messing around
Yeah.
with there?
So we do direct sales for all of our advertising, right? And it tends to be like a sponsorship that scales across multiple products. So, site ads, newsletter sponsorship, event sponsorship. Like we have a big in-person events business. Texas Tribune Festival, our largest event of the year, is in November this year. Uh, and so it kind of like, I think that we're with those direct relationships, we have not had as much of the, like, programmatic and scaled ad conversation in that space. I'm open to it, of course, but yeah, that hasn't been as big of a
Yeah.
deal for us.
So let's um let's project out a bit and sort of I'd love to hear about what you think is a key, I guess, skill set as people move forward in their jobs as reporters or editors. Like I know you said earlier that you're not using AI to replace people, but I imagine as you hire people, you're looking for people with skill sets that are compatible with the future and just what you're
Yeah,
doing. So,
yeah.
has that become a thing when you are looking to hire and with your sort of pipeline now? And what are you doing with AI, or are you comfortable with tools or anything along that level?
Yeah, I cannot speak as much to hiring in the newsroom, right? Because 'Cause I'm on the product side of the organization, but, we are, I think, just looking for people who are comfortable with change and
Mm,
comfortable with knowing that the way that we have done things in the past is going to need to constantly evolve. And that I often say, like, that, there's no perfect playbook in this moment, right? We're making things up as we go. We're trying new stuff out. I want to make sure we kind of maintain that flexibility that allows us to be really experimental and think about how, while those principles of journalism, accuracy, all of that applies, we can maintain that going forward. One thing that we do that I think is a little unique among news organizations is we survey our audience about AI. And we first participated in a trusting news cohort last summer to ask them, like, how do you feel about this right now? And then we repeated our survey this summer. And the big takeaway was that among the people who replied, they trust us, not AI, right? So we're
mm.
doing all of this, and at the same time, I'm very aware that if we get way out ahead of Texans and of our audience on this topic, that could damage our trust and credibility with them, right? So, kind of constantly trying to say, like, yes, technology is changing. AI is showing up in ways that you can't always identify, right? In all of our worlds, but making sure that like Texas Tribune journalism was produced by Texas Tribune journalists, and that we have kind of like our stance in that sense. Like we'll experiment with distribution, but at the end of the day, it's all accurate and fact checked and confirmed by us.
So in the AI world, obviously we're seeing like tons of releases all the time. I'm not sure how much time you dedicate to your own, education or playing around with stuff. Do you see anything now that you find interesting, either to you personally
Yeah.
or for the professionally, like for the organization, that you would love to do more with in 2026?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing right now is the model context protocol. Like
Mm,
if AI can accurately talk to a database of information, that presents huge potential for the Texas Tribune, which we have and maintain many reliable databases of information that could scale and help our local newsrooms better serve their audiences. One note about us, we're statewide politics and policy. We have started 2 new local newsrooms this year in Texas, part of an expansion strategy where we saw and heard again and again that people were saying we can't get reliable local information in our communities about what is happening here. So we have the Waco Bridge in Waco, Texas, which is a little bit north of Austin. and kind of a mid-sized city. And then we have the Austin Current, a newsroom in Austin, which is a very large city and a very tech-forward city. So we're kind of using those as experimentation, innovation labs around how can these local newsrooms distribute information, including sometimes with AI, in ways that still build trust with those local audiences.
Nice. So for anyone out there building, for anyone out there thinking about like what they should be doing with AI and maybe not quite as far on the path that you are, what is your number one piece of advice? What's the first thing you would tell them in
Uh,
to make it as successful as possible?
Stay true to yourself, stay true to your brand. Don't do anything that would damage that trust because it's really important and really hard to get back. And at the same time, don't be afraid of the change. Be open to experimentation and creativity around what happens because we don't control the ways that people get information. And we need to be able to kind of accept that and say like, hey, there is, the value of accurate information is still very, very true.
Nice. Invest in trust and make sure that you're ready for the change.
Yep.
We'll leave it there. Thank you, Darla Cameron. It's been great.
Thank you, Pete. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to my conversation with Darla Cameron of the Texas Tribune. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd appreciate it if you'd take just a minute to leave a rating and review for the Media Copilot in your podcast app. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Media Copilot newsletter and check out mediacopilot.ai for our classes on AI for journalists, PR pros, and communicators. Seeing you in the future.